Welcome to our deep dive, and this time we're going to explore something you might not think about every day. Typography.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be unpacking how 19th century Sinhala script transitioned from those beautiful palm leaves to the very rigid world of metal type. You might be thinking, okay, fonts, but why should I care? And by the end of this, you'll see how these tiny little letters became a battleground for cultural identity in Sri Lanka.
Absolutely fascinating.
Intrigued?
Very much so.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Our primary source for this is a dense academic dissertation called Milestones in the Development of Sinhala Typography in the 19th Century. Definitely not light reading, but we'll unpack the juiciest bits for you.
Right.
Just to set the stage, imagine traditional Sinhala, elegant, flowing, written on palm leaves with a stylus.
Beautiful script.
Almost like calligraphy.
Exactly. And that was the norm for centuries.
Yeah.
Now, picture trying to force that flowing script on a metal blocks.
Right.
It was a massive challenge.
What a culture clash.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this was happening as Ceylon was transitioning from a monarchy to British rule.
Right.
Missionaries are spreading their influence, and a Buddhist revival is brewing.
Yeah, it was a time of tremendous upheaval. And typography became a really powerful tool in this struggle.
So let's dive into the specifics.
Okay.
This deep dive is going to focus on three key players in this typographic revolution.
Okay.
The Dutch press in Colombo, the Serampore Mission Press in India, and the Wesleyan Mission Press back in Colombo.
Okay.
First up, the Dutch.
Right.
They established their press way back in 1737.
Wow.
They were tasked with printing government notices and, of course, the Bible.
Of course.
But what's interesting is they didn't just impose Western typographic standards wholesale. They actually tried to blend them with traditional Sinhala elements.
Interesting. A hybrid approach.
So what did that look like in practice?
Well, they introduced word boundaries and hyphenation, which were completely new to Sinhala.
Wow.
This might seem like a small change, but think about it.
Yeah.
It fundamentally altered the visual structure of written Sinhala.
It's like going from writing a long, unbroken sentence to breaking it down into smaller, more digestible chunks.
Exactly. And for a script that had been written continuously for centuries, this was a radical shift.
But wouldn't that risk alienating the Sinhalese people who were used to that traditional way of writing?
You would think so. But they also retained certain traditional elements. Almost like a peace offering. For example, they used the kundaliya. That distinctive swirling punctuation mark extensively. It was almost like a bridge between the two writing systems.
It's like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Modernize the script, but hold on to some of its unique character. Did it work?
It's hard to say for sure how the Sinhalese people perceive these changes at the time.
But we do know that the Dutch press played a significant role in introducing Sinhala script to the world of print.
And speaking of introducing things, there was a key figure at the Dutch press, Gabriel Schade, the man who actually created those first Sinhala typefaces. What do we know about him?
He was actually the boss of the armory.
Wow.
Which makes you wonder how he ended up as a type founder.
Yeah.
It's believed he may have collaborated with local scribes and silversmiths. Drawing on their expertise in shaping letters.
So fascinating to think of this skilled craftsman. Probably more accustomed to working with metal for weapons, painstakingly creating these tiny little letter forms that would have a lasting impact on Sinhala script.
It really highlights the human element behind this technological shift. These weren't just abstract processes, they were real people. With their own skills and motivations driving these innovations.
So we have this hybrid approach with the Dutch press, blending Western and traditional elements. But what was happening in 19th century Ceylon that further influenced this typographic evolution?
Well, the context here is crucial. Ceylon in the 1800s was a society in flux. The monarchy had just given way to British rule. Missionary activity was ramping up. And there were underlying cultural tensions bubbling beneath the surface.
Real melting pot of change and uncertainty.
Absolutely.
And how did this impact Sinhala script?
Missionary schools set up to spread Christianity and Western education played a huge role in shaping the direction of Sinhala printing. They needed to print textbooks and religious materials in Sinhala to reach the local population.
Yeah.
But there's a fascinating detail here.
Okay.
The initial response of the Sinhalese to printed text was actually resistance.
Really? Why is that?
They saw reading as almost a magical act, something reserved for the educated elite.
Right.
Closely associated with Buddhist scriptures and rituals, printed text seemed to demystify this sacred practice, making it accessible to the masses.
So it was seen as a threat to their cultural and religious identity.
In a way, yes.
I can see how that would breed resistance.
Absolutely.
And this cultural tension had a profound impact on how Sinhala typography developed.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that more in a bit.
All right.
For now, let's shift our focus from Ceylon to India, where another key player enters the scene, the Serampore Mission Press.
Right.
Renowned for producing Bibles in a multitude of languages. So last time we left off with that Serampore Mission Press, they were based in India, but they became involved in Sinhala printing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, in the early 1800s, they were commissioned by the Calcutta Auxiliary Bible Society to create a Sinhala font for a new translation of the Bible. They even brought over Sinhalese compositors from Ceylon to ensure authenticity.
So they were serious about this project.
Oh, yeah.
But wait, didn't you mention something about a fire?
Oh, right. Disaster struck.
Oh, no.
When a fire broke out and destroyed that high-quality paper intended for the Sinhala New Testament.
What?
Talk about a setback.
Yeah.
But what's truly significant about the Serampore font
is
that it introduced a revolutionary concept for Sinhala.
Okay.
Stroke modulation.
Stroke modulation.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory on what that means.
It means the strokes, the lines that make up each letter, vary in thickness.
Okay.
Think of a calligraphy pen, how it creates thin upstrokes and thicker downstrokes.
Yeah.
That's stroke modulation.
Ah, so it's not just a uniform line, it has more depth and visual interest?
Exactly. And it's believed they got this idea from those Sinhalese writing samples sent from Ceylon, likely created with pointed nib pens.
So Western writing tools inadvertently influenced Sinhala typography.
Yeah, in a way.
That's fascinating. So the Serampore font wasn't just about translating the Bible.
Right.
It also marked a stylistic shift towards a more visually dynamic script.
Precisely. And this set the stage for further typographic innovations. Particularly by the Wesleyan Mission Press back in Ceylon.
Right.
They really took the baton and ran with it.
Speaking of the Wesleyan Mission Press, they were incredibly prolific.
Oh, yeah.
Printing everything from Bibles and dictionaries to pamphlets aimed at converting Buddhists.
Right.
But wasn't that sort of counterproductive? I mean, if typography was seen as a tool of westernization, wouldn't that fuel resistance to their message?
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
And indeed, there was a tension in their approach.
Okay.
On the one hand, they were actively trying to undermine Buddhist beliefs.
Right.
But on the other hand, by printing educational materials in Sinhala, they were inadvertently contributing to literacy and cultural awareness among the Sinhalese people.
So they were simultaneously promoting and undermining Sinhalese culture. That's a fascinating paradox.
It is. And this paradox ultimately played a significant role in the Buddhist revival movement. As Buddhist leaders sought to reclaim their religious and cultural identity, they realized they needed their own printing presses. They recognized the power of print to disseminate ideas and counter the influence of the missionaries.
So the weapon forged by the missionaries was ultimately turned against them?
In a sense, yes.
Wow.
The establishment of the first Buddhist presses in the 1860s was a turning point.
Okay.
Buddhists now had a platform to defend their beliefs, publish their own texts, and shape the narrative in their own words, literally.
That's a powerful example of how technology can be appropriated and repurposed.
Yeah.
Kind of like how social media today can be used for both social control and activism.
Precisely.
But let's not forget the individuals behind these printing presses.
Right.
We've talked about the institutions, but what about the Sinhalese printers and compositors who are actually doing that hands-on work?
They were highly skilled craftsmen responsible for setting type, operating the presses, and ensuring the quality of the printed material.
Right, and remember, printing was a complex process back then.
Very much so.
It required training and expertise.
Absolutely.
So the missionaries essentially created a new generation of Sinhalese printing professionals.
Yeah, you could say that.
Did that lead to any pushback from the traditional scribes who are used to working with palm leaves?
There's limited historical documentation on that specific dynamic.
Okay.
But what we do know is that the Wesleyan Mission Press in particular was very conscious of the aesthetic qualities of their typefaces.
Okay.
Constantly striving for clarity,
right,
readability, and visual appeal.
So they were going beyond just making the script functional in print. They were starting to think about the art of typography.
Exactly. James Nicholson, a key figure at the Wesleyan Press, was obsessed with creating typefaces that were both prominent and attractive qualities he saw in the best of Western typography.
So Western aesthetics were definitely influencing the development of Sinhala typefaces.
For sure.
But were there any conscious efforts to preserve the unique characteristics of the traditional script?
That's where those native Sinhalese printing houses come in.
Okay.
Ones established by Buddhists.
Right.
They had a different agenda.
Okay.
They weren't beholden to Western typographic conventions.
Right.
They were more interested in reviving traditional elements and reinterpreting them for the modern age.
So it becomes a sort of tug of war between Westernization and the preservation of Sinhalese identity.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some examples of this?
Well, let's go back to the Kundalaya.
Okay.
Remember the Wesleyan missionaries had abandoned it.
Right. It was seen as outdated and inefficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for many Sinhalese printers, the Kundalaya was much more than just a punctuation mark.
Right.
It was a symbol of their heritage, a visual reminder of their unique writing tradition.
So bringing it back was a way of reclaiming their typographic identity.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there.
Oh.
They also experimented with different stroke modulations, letter form proportions, and even the overall layout of text.
Wow.
It was a conscious effort to create a distinctly Sinhalese typographic style.
So they weren't just replicating the past.
No.
They were innovating and adapting traditional elements for a new era.
Precisely. And this tension between tradition and modernity, between Western influence and Sinhalese identity, is a theme that runs throughout the history of Sinhala typography.
And it's a theme we'll continue to explore in part 3 of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
We'll delve deeper into the evolution of Sinhala typefaces,
right,
the rise of native Sinhalese printing houses, and the lasting impact of this remarkable typographic journey. Welcome back to our deep dive into 19th century Sinhala typography.
It's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
From palm leaves to printing presses, from the Dutch to the missionaries, and now to this burgeoning wave of native Sinhalese printing houses.
It really highlights how typography is so much more than just arranging letters on a page.
Absolutely. It's intertwined with history, culture, power dynamics, you name it.
Yeah.
And as we move into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we see Sinhala typography becoming a powerful tool for expressing national identity.
We touched on this idea of a tug of war between Western influence and Sinhalese identity in the last part. Can you elaborate on how this played out?
Well, the native Sinhalese presses weren't just reacting against Westernization.
Right.
They were actively shaping their own vision of what Sinhala typography should be.
So they weren't just going back to the old ways?
No, they were taking inspiration from the past, but also innovating and adapting traditional elements for a new era.
Okay.
It was a conscious effort to create a modern yet distinctly Sinhalese aesthetic.
Can you give us some concrete examples of these innovations?
Think back to the Kundalaya. The missionaries had rejected it, but the native presses embraced it, elevating it to a symbol of cultural pride. They experimented with different ways of incorporating it, sometimes even using it decoratively.
So a punctuation mark became a statement of identity.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about reviving old elements. They were also pushing the boundaries of stroke modulation, experimenting with letter form proportions, and exploring new ways of laying out text on the page.
So they were drawing on multiple influences, traditional Sinhalese calligraphy, the innovations of the missionary presses, and even contemporary Western typographic trends.
They were synthesizing all these different elements to forge a new path for Sinhala typography.
This all sounds very abstract. Can you give us an example of a specific typeface that embodies this new Sinhalese aesthetic?
One that comes to mind is the typeface used for the newspaper Lakmina, which was founded in 1862 by a prominent Sinhalese scholar. It featured bold, modulated strokes, distinctive letter forms, and a strong visual presence on the page.
So it was both modern and rooted in tradition.
Precisely. It was a powerful statement of Sinhalese identity at a time when Sri Lanka was still under British rule. Imagine picking up that newspaper and seeing your own script beautifully rendered, asserting its presence in the world. It must have been incredibly empowering.
It's fascinating how those seemingly small typographic choices could carry such weight.
It speaks to the power of typography to shape how we perceive and interact with language. And by extension with culture itself.
So what happened next? Did this new Sinhalese aesthetic become the dominant style?
It wasn't a sudden overnight shift. It was a gradual process of experimentation, refinement, and adaptation. The missionary presses continued to operate, but their influence waned as the native presses gained momentum. And over time, a more hybrid style emerged, incorporating elements from both Western and Sinhalese traditions.
So the tug-of-war continued, but with a more balanced outcome.
Yes. And that process of negotiation and evolution continues to this day. As Sinhala script has adapted to the digital age.
Of course.
New typographic challenges and possibilities have arisen.
That's a thought-provoking point. We've focused on the 19th century. But this story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
How do you think these historical developments have shaped the way Sinhala is written and read today?
Well, for one thing, they've left us with an incredibly rich and diverse typographic landscape. Sinhala fonts today reflect this complex interplay of influences from the traditional to the modern, from the Western to the uniquely Sinhalese.
It's almost like looking at a Sinhala typeface is like looking at a visual history of Sri Lanka.
That's a great way to put it. And as technology continues to evolve, so too will Sinhala typography.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see how designers navigate this evolving landscape. Balancing tradition with innovation. Legibility with aesthetics. And the unique characteristics of Sinhala script with the demands of the digital world.
It's a testament to the resilience and adaptability of Sinhala script that it's thrived through centuries of change. From palm leaves to printing presses, from colonialism to independence, and now into the digital age.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has really just scratched the surface.
It has.
There's so much more to explore in the world of Sinhala typography. And we encourage you to delve deeper into this fascinating subject.
Definitely.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
For sure.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of 19th century Sinhala typography.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an eye-opening journey, and we hope it sparked your curiosity about the hidden stories behind the letters we see every day. Until next time, keep exploring.